Welcome back to Psychedelics Today. This is Joe Moore coming at you from Breckenridge, Colorado. Today on the show, we have the people who made Dosed, which is an incredible documentary focused on a woman in Canada, Vancouver, British Columbia, struggling with substance use disorder and her path discovering potentially the healing powers of psychedelic mushrooms and Iboga. Iboga is pretty big in Vancouver. Thankfully, there's a pretty big scene there. A fair amount of addiction, too. It's a really tough city. Gabor Mate kind of discusses the situation in some of those neighborhoods in Vancouver and some of his books, and it's pretty incredible to learn about and just know about. This movie is really about the healing journey of this woman over the course of time. It's certainly a project, and yeah, I'm really happy that I was able to see this movie before it was really released, and it's a really, really freaking cool movie. So I think people should check it out if you're interested in psychedelics and healing from substance use disorder, or just that narrative in general. I think it's a really well done story. Read a number of reviews. People have cried a lot watching the movie. Because it hits close to home. A lot of us probably know people that are suffering pretty hard and don't have a great way out. And this film shows a way forward, and really impressed with how they were able to put it together and happy with their work, and definitely think it's a must watch in 2020. So take the time, watch it, share it with some friends and family, and you can help shift the narrative. I think potentially more than a lot of the older psychedelic documentaries, this one can really help shift opinion. It's going to be probably a little hard for people to wrap their heads around it, but I think they'll see the journey and really understand what's going on. Yeah, this stuff isn't simple, but I think more stories like this one coming out in the movie Dosed will be really helpful. So I hope you like this interview with the subject and crew of the film, and let us know what you think. Hit us up at psychedelicstoday, email@gmail.com. If you haven't yet, we would really, really, really appreciate it. Please leave a review on our Facebook page if you're there. So facebook.com/psychedelics today, and click reviews, and you can just leave a little review there for us, and anything helps. If you're on an iPhone, just search for the podcast app and you can leave us a review in there. It takes just a minute, and it would mean the world to us if you did so. Yeah, one more word from a sponsor, and we'll see you on the other side. This episode is brought to you by Mudwater. Mudwater is a coffee alternative with 4 medicinal mushrooms and adaptogens. With 1/7 the caffeine is a cup of coffee, you get sustainable energy without the anxiety and jitters of coffee. Kyle and I have had about 3 months worth of Mudwater, and we really like it a lot. Mudwater has really helped me slow down my coffee consumption, and I feel great after drinking it. Another thing I like about this company is that they donate a portion of each month's revenue to MAPS. Check them out at mudwater.com, mudwtr.com. Use the code psychedelic at checkout for 15% off. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Psychedelics Today. Today on the show, we have the team that put together the movie Dosed. We have Nick, Tyler, and Adrianne. Thank you all for joining us.
Hi, thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely excited to talk about it. It was a really impressive film, and I don't really know how we're going to expand here, but the essence of it was covering, Adrianne, your story from addiction to recovery and struggling with, I guess, Iboga treatments or Iboga treatments, or how do you like to call it? Like rituals, maybe?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I not only Iboga, but also psilocybin.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I guess I refer to them as ceremonies or sits, therapeutic psychedelic sits.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's a good neutral term. I liked the context of how they were using in that house in the film. It seemed really kind of ceremonial and traditional. What was that a traditional Bwiti ceremony at all, or was it something a little different?
Yeah, that as far as I know, Mark, who led the ceremony, he is trained by Bwiti. He's been to Africa a number of times, and He is a ordained and approved to perform traditional weedy ceremonies. And he does everything, even when he makes the medicine, right down to making the medicine itself. It's very traditional. And so that was like really, I think that was really important, that spiritual and ceremonial setting for my treatment. I feel like that was really important.
Yeah. No, it looked really meaningful, and his energy in that couple scenes was really impressive.
He's very, very passionate about what he does. And yeah, he's really great at what he does too.
So let's rewind a little bit and start with Tyler and Nick. So Tyler and Nick, you're the filmmakers, and I'm kind of curious, like what got you interested initially in this kind of psychedelic and addiction recovery kind of topic? Was there anything that came up for you? It seemed like you were somewhat new to the topic at the beginning. Is that right?
Yeah. This is Tyler here. I had never done any psychedelics in my life up until coincidentally about a month prior to the conversation that I had with Adrianne that sort of led us down this road that ended up with, her recovery and the documentary Dosed. So I've never had an interest in psychedelics. I've actually shied away from them. It wasn't something that I thought sounded like fun. I was worried about potentially having bad trips and stuff like that. And so I just left it alone. But Nick and a couple other friends convinced me that, it's not like that, and, do some magic mushrooms with them and just go out and enjoy nature. So I did that, and it was actually a really beautiful and wonderful experience. And like the next day I didn't feel hungover because I hadn't been drinking alcohol. We were doing something different. So I felt quite good. I was like, oh, that was interesting. Super fun night, had some good laughs, sort of appreciated things that you don't normally notice on the day to day, like nature and stuff like that, feelings of connection. And then, so I'd say a few days after that, I just happened to see an article that was saying magic mushrooms or psilocybin was beneficial for mental health disorders. And that got me to click on it, whereas normally I wouldn't have even bothered. So then I learned a little bit about that and the studies that were happening at the Imperial College London with the clinical trials there for depression. And shortly after that, Adrianne was texting me from a really low place, and I just asked her if she'd ever tried psychedelics. And that's kind of how it all lined up. Of course, Nick and I were talking about doing a documentary, some documentaries, different ideas anyways. And, this slowly came on the radar, combined with my experience and then, reading the article, but it wasn't something we were pursuing until Adrianne and I had that conversation.
And the interesting thing, this is Nick just jumping in. An interesting thing is that we had been kicking around several documentary ideas, and we had been working on some for a bit and then shelving them. And some of them were like cool sort of, topics that had some benefit to society, and some of them weren't. And we even had a movie just about dating that we were working on for a bit that we shelved. And it's funny to look back because we never expected what this journey would be like and where it would take us. And certainly, with our email inbox flooded with people that are letting us know how important this film is for them and for maybe their recovery, people who have learned about these medicines through the film and ended up finding treatment and going through recovery themselves. It's almost like we became accidental advocates for psychedelics, which was a topic that we didn't know anything about. It's really kind of an amazing journey that we went through.
Well, that's really serendipitous and interesting, but that's the times we're living in. And when roughly did you get started? Was this a couple years ago?
Yeah, it was the first time that we interviewed Adrianne was the end of August 2017.
Great.
And then, just several months of the process, like learning and then finding different people to help us along the way. And, obviously a grueling editing process. We actually had almost 400 hours of footage filmed from this journey. And it wasn't necessarily meant to be about Adrianne in the beginning. So we were interviewing a lot of other people as well. And then as we realized, everybody's sort of having these, positive stories that they can share. And then here we are following somebody going through the stories and also showing that it's not like a walk in the park or some kind of magic bullet, showing the ups and downs and the challenges that it takes to sort of overcome deep-rooted addiction and or mental illness.
Yeah, that's great. And Adrianne, was it a little nerve-wracking or were you a little doubtful when these two guys approached you a little bit about psychedelics?
No, I don't think so. I had also heard here and there about more and more around the time that we started the filming about psychedelics for depression, anxiety, and addiction. Like I'd heard of Gabor Mate's work with ayahuasca, so I was sort of familiar with it. And I'd had periods of sobriety, but I wasn't ever able to stay sober. And even during my periods of sobriety, I struggled a lot with depression and anxiety. So when Tyler approached me, it was really serendipitous because I had actually just emailed a clinical trial that was set to take place in Vancouver about taking part in their clinical trial with psilocybin for substance use disorder. And literally a few days later, Tyler had asked me if I had ever tried psychedelics because I was in a really, really dark place at that time, very low. I was back using drugs and alcohol. And so when he, suggested that, I was pretty quick to be on board. Initially, we had talked about microdosing. I was interested in microdosing. And I thought that's what this was going to be about. I was very nervous. I was nervous initially to do the full dose because there's something, I had always avoided psychedelics. I used drugs and alcohol as an escape, to avoid my feelings, to avoid reality. And I knew that psychedelics were not the thing to escape and avoid reality, that it would present some, challenges and put a mirror up to me, I guess. So I was definitely hesitant, but I was also really desperate at that time, because everything else had failed me. All the other traditional methods had failed me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. And Vancouver Metro is like a really interesting area because of the, I guess, psychedelic history there and kind of the looseness relative to other places in North America with which people can operate. Like mushrooms are it seems like people barely go after mushroom people. It seems like Iboga therapy is wide open. Or what is the legal status in British Columbia or Vancouver Metro around Iboga and Iboga therapy?
Do you want to answer that, Tyler?
I mean, it's illegal.
Yeah.
So, it's like, perhaps, I mean, there's obviously countries, cities, and certain states and whatnot that might, sort of go after and punish these things more than others. Like we have to give big congratulations to some cities in the United States, actually, where a lot of this stuff is punished the most. But then we have decriminalize Denver, decriminalizing mushrooms, and other cities coming up now, like decriminalizing not only mushrooms, but also Iboga, ayahuasca, peyote, I think DMT maybe, just like the plant-based psychedelics. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I mean, it is illegal. And when Nick and I first sort of thought about filming a documentary about this, it's kind of weird because it turned into like an obvious life or death situation to help our friend, and that was the priority because she was using other illegal drugs anyways, like fentanyl-laced heroin from the streets. But Nick and I were pretty nervous about, presenting, just like filming illegal activity and, documenting it in the hopes that it might work. But the reason that we thought we should continue with this is because originally we wanted to just film Adrianne before, hopefully during, and then after the clinical trial that she had heard about. So when we were having this conversation in the beginning, we're like, oh, that seems like a really great thing. And then it would be under the supervision of medical professionals and obviously legal and sanctioned by the government because it was a clinical trial that was supposed to take place. But Adrianne had the sense that the clinical trial was probably not going to be funded and take place even as soon as they said, which was already several months away. Mm-hmm. And, she wanted to try magic mushrooms on her own because of the danger of the street drugs that she was using and addicted to. So we kind of thought at first it would be this filming a clinical trial, and then it ended up, being doing it, kind of filming things on your own and filming things on the underground, which it is all illegal still, unfortunately.
Just to add, actually, Iboga, it was legal quite a few years ago, but they've actually moved it in Canada. It's moved to the prescription drug list, but there's no approved disorders for that to be prescribed. So it's not illegal on the prescription drug list, but you can't really prescribe it for anything. So, and then obviously psilocybin and all the other psychedelics in Canada are illegal. But I feel like, I think MAPS Canada and other people are pretty optimistic that is changing, and that we're moving towards the legalization, or at the very least decriminalization of psychedelics.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's definitely illegal for somebody to give somebody Iboga in Canada, which is what transpired. So although technically it's not illegal, it's like the activity is illegal.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Like we have this. So kind of tangentially, I remember watching some stuff on some news stations a year or two ago about drug prices and it being so high that some people choose to die instead of breaking the law because they can't afford it. And they could be buying this stuff for like $30 a month from China or India, whereas it's like $8,000 to like $30,000 a month for some of these drugs. And they choose to die instead of breaking the law. And I find there's some analogy here with psychedelics and psychedelic assisted therapies, because often people are like, oh, this is illegal, so I'm just going to not do it. And it's a matter of life and death, literally, for a lot of people. And Adrianne, I think you did a really great job, or the whole team did a really great job showing that in the film, of how like seriously life-threatening this stuff can be. And how hard it is, and the bravery required to go forward. Like you certainly showed a lot of courage, Adrianne. Like, anything come up when I say that for you?
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, well, first of all, I don't even know if it's about people not wanting to break the law. I mean, that's definitely a huge component of it, but I think people just don't even know where to access it because it is illegal. Like if they're not, they aren't connected with somebody in the underground, or, they wouldn't even know where to go or where to start to get this treatment. I was so surprised at, the underground healing network that was in Vancouver. I had no idea that even existed, so it's not accessible for people, even if they wanted to or knew about it. So that's my issue. I really want these therapies to be available to people because it is life or death, and it was life-changing for me. And I know that some people get sober or find healing and recovery other ways, not with psychedelics, but I know there's lots of people that are still struggling out there, and this is something that helped me. So it's really important for me that, I speak up about this and, do what I can to advocate for these medicines being available to people.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great. The access component is huge. It takes often months to even get a hint at how you might hunt this down. I really appreciated the scene when you went to that conference or event where Mark Hayden was.
Yeah.
It looked like you were trying to get into a clinical trial there, which is always, it's a tough way to get treatment because, like you said, it can take many months if you even ever get accepted into it.
Yeah, and I think to this day that clinical trial still hasn't happened. So there's a lot of red tape.
Well, they're working.
Now, was that with psilocybin or Iboga?
That was with psilocybin. I'm not aware of any clinical trials or very much research at all around Iboga, which I think is something else that needs to be looked at. But obviously, clinical trials are extremely expensive, and there's lots of bureaucracy and red tape to get through. So yeah, there definitely needs to be more research around Iboga too, especially in the current, opioid crisis that we're experiencing. I think it's really important that that's looked at.
Yeah, I totally agree. From what I understand, after MAPS is finished with MDMA, they will start probably looking at Iboga or Ibogaine next. It certainly needs to be looked at. I know this company MindMed, I think they're out of New York. They're looking at 18MC, which is kind of an analog or derivative that's less psychedelic, but it still seems to help a number of people. It's certainly better than conventional treatments, but I think it perhaps might be less successful than Iboga or Ibogaine, but Time will tell.
We heard about that and talked to some providers who've worked with Iboga for many, many years. And obviously, if that works and it's something that the governments can get behind and approve, and it can get people off of like nasty opioids that are, really ruining their lives and overdoses and, killing people and all that, that's great. But apparently the consensus is that because it lacks the psychedelic component, you don't have the trip, you don't have that awakening and, the reset and, maybe the self-reflection that one might need to understand why they're harming themselves in the first place. So, there's so many moving components to what the world needs to, end needless suffering. And of course, like end, serious addiction issues and stuff like that. But it seems like a lot of people need a perspective shift, and psychedelics can help with that a lot. People say that it's, 10 to 20 years of therapy in a matter of just a few hours. So if you really extrapolate that, if it would take somebody, decades to get over, deep rooted trauma that they went through when they were a child, for example, but they could maybe work with a psychedelic substance 1 or 2 or 3 times and then, get the same benefits of 20 years of therapy, that's going to make their life a lot better.
Yeah, I would also just to add that for me, like a lot of people think that, especially with opiates, that the biggest challenge is the physical dependence and just getting through the withdrawals.
Right.
And like once you get past that, then you're kind of in the clear. But that is definitely not my experience with addiction. I have gotten sober and detoxed many, many, many times and not stayed sober. So obviously, while the physical withdrawals are completely excruciating and definitely a big barrier to getting sober, there's really something more to recovery than that. And that's that kind of spiritual experience or awakening. And the psychedelic component is really important to that. And I feel like that's what's contributed to me, not only getting sober, but staying sober.
Yeah, absolutely.
And to those that like are listening that maybe aren't in the know, we're all sort of talking about it as if everyone understands. But Iboga is an interesting psychedelic, just so everyone's clear, because not only will it interrupt the physical withdrawals for opioids, so you're no longer physically dependent, but it also provides you with an intense, like, psychotherapeutic, psychedelic experience, maybe similar to ayahuasca, like very, very intense, very vivid, and lasting a very long time, many hours or a day or something like that. So it's quite an incredible psychedelic. And, it was so integral for Adrianne in her healing journey.
Yeah.
Right. So we call it a atypical or non-classical psychedelic because it's not a tryptamine or phenethylamine like mescaline or mushrooms or like psilocybin. It's like a really, really complicated molecule. So it's, nature does a really good job with the chemistry on this one, and it's really hard to replicate it in a lab, though I think we're getting close to isolating the molecule in a somewhat affordable way, or being able to synthesize it in a somewhat affordable and scalable way. Because there are some issues with it in the wild from what I understand from people like Dimitri Janis. So if we're going to treat everybody, we do probably not have enough of the pure root bark for everybody, but that's a problem to solve together later.
Yeah, and an interesting thing as well, you're talking about, the expense. That one side of it is how much it costs for treatment. It is quite expensive, but it's a fraction of the cost when you compare it to methods that don't work. Like, for example, opioid replacement therapy, where you have people who are addicted to opioids on methadone for their entire life. And in Canada, here where this took place, the government does give each pharmacy $6,000 per year for every single person that is dependent on methadone. And that goes on year after year after year after year. And then when you think
do the individuals pay for that, or does the province pay for that?
The government pays for it. Yeah.
You do. I did have to pay for my methadone unless you were covered. I didn't have, at a certain point, I did not have coverage. So I did have to pay for it.
So it's a double hit then. So there's double funds coming in that are racking up. And then you think about things like treatment, traditional treatment centers where they cost maybe $30,000 or $40,000, and people go through this situation where they sort of get, not physically addicted, but there's no psychotherapeutic work going on. And so people just rebound and relapse at quite a staggering rate, like maybe 97% of the time or something like that. They'll go back to drugs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really tough. Do any of you have an idea what a standard detox rehab facility would cost for about a month or something, or how that typically works relative to?
In my experience, I mean, there are detox centers in Vancouver that are run by the government, but there's not a lot of therapy that goes on there. It's just a medical detox, and that would be free. But I myself have gone to a treatment center, a private treatment center, and this was like 10 years ago. So I think for 6 weeks of treatment, it was over $30,000. I ended up going back for a second time. I think in total, my parents probably spent close to $50,000 or $60,000 having to remortgage their house to send me there. And I relapsed almost immediately both times upon leaving. So, some people that I went through with did stay sober for whatever reason. I don't know. It's just where they were at in their journey. But I know a lot of people that didn't, and even a lot of people that are not with us anymore, sadly.
Right. It's brutal. And it's worth knowing.
Yeah. And a lot of people, like I know some people in those treatment centers, that was, I think someone there, it was their 13th or 14th treatment center. Sometimes it was their people's second, third, fourth. Like it can be a revolving door at times. So at that point, we need to look at like, this obviously isn't working for a lot of people. It might be working for some people, but it's not working for a lot of people. So, maybe it's time to try something different.
Yeah, absolutely. Did y'all ever connect with this gentleman, Dana Beal? He's kind of a pioneer in the field of Iboga therapy.
Yeah, actually, I chatted with him several times because Mark Howard, who runs Iboga Soul, put me in touch with him. And we were meant to meet up with him in New York City for our big theatrical tour launch. And the three of us were going to fly there and kind of kick things off. And then obviously the pandemic took over the world right around the time that we had our flights, and we weren't sure should we cancel our flights? What's going on? And then next thing you know, everything's shut down. So, but yeah, he's a really nice guy and knows a lot about the subject of Ibogaine, and obviously he's like a very strong supporter of it.
Yeah, he's a fascinating character, kind of like a cowboy.
Yeah,
they don't really make him like Dana Beal anymore. I can't wait to get him on the show. He's just called me randomly at times, and I never even really knew him.
Oh yeah,
like what is going on here, Dana? This is cool, but yikes.
Funny.
Anyway, back to the film. Like how this trajectory of like mushrooms to Iboga, was that a transition that y'all really felt? Like these mushrooms aren't seeming to really cut it, or how did that play out? That kind of transition.
Well, we didn't really know. We were all pretty naive about psychedelics and, all the different psychedelics. Initially, like I had heard so much about mushrooms, as had Tyler, for depression, anxiety, and substance use. But we quickly learned, and you guys can add to this, that because I was opioid dependent, that mushrooms, although I had an beautiful experience the first couple times I did mushrooms, because I was dependent on opioids, that we needed to go another route. And we were told that pretty quickly in our journey. We didn't know anything at first. So we were just kind of going with it and learning as we went.
Yeah, that's huge. Okay. And you had been in touch with a number of experts. Actually, hold on. This is really interesting. It's a big moose I'm seeing, right? I don't know if you can see it, but it's right out my window.
Whoa.
Moose might not be too novel for you guys, but
that is a big moose.
My goodness.
It's fascinating.
That's so cool.
Yeah, all right. Back to work.
Wow.
Hopefully it doesn't come at me. I almost got attacked yesterday.
Where are you?
I'm in the high alpine of Colorado, about an hour and a half from Denver.
Oh, wow.
Cool.
10,000 feet altitude or so. That's where my apartment is.
Oh my goodness.
Breckenridge is the town.
Lots of snow still.
Oh yeah, it's coming down hard right now.
Wow.
So you did have experts that were kind of supporting you through this kind of, I don't know, like, did you have people kind of steering you from mushrooms to Iboga, or like addiction experts?
I mean, as you'll see in the film, there was one pivotal moment that we were really told that, mushrooms probably aren't going to cut it for Adrianne's situation. We were optimistic, or maybe just more hopeful, that mushrooms would be what would work because it seemed like safe enough anyways. You know, we did enough research, I would say, to sort of like ease into it. You know, when Adrianne was doing the doses on her own, it wasn't really like the highest doses. So it's just kind of being careful with it and cautious. And then, you know, when we met up with some other people, finally in the underground sort of psychedelic world here in Vancouver, you know, they were helping us with like the higher doses of mushrooms and guided journeys instead of, you know, the way we were doing it, as you'd see in the documentary, is like not recommended, both from a, you know, like ceremonial or a clinical aspect. It was just kind of like, we're new, so we're trying it this way. And then, it got to the point where, you know, we could sort of see the struggles. We were kind of running up against the wall, and you know, there may have been some frustrations settling in, but there was still a lot of very, very positive things happening when Adrianne was working with the mushrooms. But it just seemed like she may have like reached her limit with that and was still struggling so much with the physical component of the opioid addiction. And that's when we learned about Iboga and Iboga. And that was really the first time I'd ever heard of it, or any of us had ever heard of it. So it wasn't something that came up when I was doing research, or any of us were doing research like before all of this. It just kind of seemed like, oh, you know, well, we'll try to do what they're doing in the clinical trial with psilocybin, and we'll just use magic mushrooms, and hopefully that'll work.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. So I'm sure you get reached out to regularly now saying like, how do I get access to this? Or like, is it right for me? Do you have any kind of guidelines you share with people for that kind of stuff?
I mean, we've got on our website, dosedmovie.com, we've got resources for people, and some of the people that were providers in the film. They're listed on our webpage, and also other providers around the world. And we're always looking to add more as well. So we feel like it's very important to share information with people, because people are looking for options, and the options that are available and legally mandated by the governments around the world often don't work for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And like the only thing, you know, it's kind of an interesting thing with psychedelics, because, you know, there's certain things that you need to consider. It's like, well, firstly, we haven't talked about this yet, but Iboga and Iboga can be dangerous. It can actually cause a problem with your heart, and it can kill people in very rare circumstances. But, you know, you need to get proper medical testing done. You should have a doctor or a nurse present. And when Adrianne was working with Iboga, there was always a nurse present, and other people who are obviously very experienced with this. And she went through a series of medical tests leading up to her treatment. You know, so it's not something you want to do on your own, especially since it's like it's more of a rare psychedelic. So, you know, where would you even get it? And then you just need somebody, people that know what they're doing, in order to, you know, have the best beneficial results. And obviously mushrooms are ranked a lot safer, you know, but people might have a bad time on them because it's bringing up a lot of stuff. And usually it's just kind of thoughts within your own mind. But when you come through the other side, everybody's like, wow, everybody needs to try that, is at least what everybody's told me. When you do a high dose, you know, but you might cry, you might laugh, you might go through some challenging times remembering things, you know, that have happened to you, or things that you've done to other people. And in a way it's cathartic though. And that's the, you know, maybe the like therapeutic side of it working for people. So it's always good to make sure that you do have a guide, somebody experienced, that can just make sure that you stay with it. And if things get challenging, they can hold your hand or remind you why you wanted to do that in the first place.
Yeah, that's huge. That's huge. like it's no secret, or it shouldn't be, that there's been a number of deaths with Iboga, but it's not necessarily Iboga's fault. It's like people really need to have, at the very least, a physician look at an EKG, looking for kind of abnormal heart activity.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, exactly.
if even better as a cardiologist, because there's certain things on an EKG that a standard physician wouldn't necessarily know to recognize as a problem.
Yeah, especially if they don't know what Iboga, and a lot of medical professionals don't know anything about Iboga, so they might not pick up on something that an experienced Iboga provider, would know about.
Right. It's a really important thing, and often in the throes of like a really serious addiction, you can kind of grow physically ill or weak, even, and perhaps your heart muscle isn't necessarily strong enough to be able to handle it yet.
Yeah, heroin in particular, any kind of opiate, like if you've overdosed, that can be very, very hard in your heart. So that's an unfortunate side to that, if you've had prolonged use of certain substances, that can cause, strain on your heart. So that's the one issue with Iboga.
Yeah, definitely like the biggest cause for concern. And that's why like people shouldn't necessarily be doing it at home alone. But it's a hard math with these addictions that are very life-threatening, because not everybody necessarily has access to go to a clinic or have a professional check it out, and they're not happy with their lives, and they're pretty sure they're going to die any day now. So it's like, at what point does the individual make that decision to try out on their own with some light peer support? So it's like, I have sympathy for those people that just need the quick and dirty, but it's also like there is a life-threatening aspect here that needs to be examined. So yeah, I don't want to say it's good or bad. It's just like, let's examine and acknowledge these risks, and all of these things can be mitigated with professionals.
Yeah, the real problem is that people are forced to make these decisions and these take these risks because something that has been known for 40 years to have this wonderful effect on opioid addicts is somehow something that nobody knows about and isn't legalized.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if it was legal, it would be a lot safer because everybody could access it in a way that would be under proper supervision. And in the Western world, it needs to go through medicalized testing and clinical trials and all of that stuff. But like, let's not forget, it comes from Gabon, Africa, and that's where Mark trained with the Bwiti people there, and they blessed him with bringing that back to Canada. And I know he's also done ceremonies in I believe Costa Rica for people. So it's kind of like a thing where you need to travel around to find it, but going back for many hundreds of years without the medical testing and stuff like that, they've used it ceremonial. Thousands probably. Yeah. They've used it for a long time in Africa. And, Mark and some other friends that have been over there, they said they don't even have a word in their dialect for anxiety. So they don't know what that is. Nice. And that's one of the biggest problems for people in the Western world when you get caught up with all the, I don't even know what it is. Is it the American dream? Is it the Instagram? Is it just like wanting what you can't have? What are the pressures that are causing so much anxiety? But it's like,
I think it's a loss of connection with yourself and with community and with, nature and what it actually means to be human. That's how I see it.
Yeah.
We're all descendants of successful tribes, and our culture really doesn't look like that anymore. It's like jobs, commutes, pushing our limits to get whatever we think success is. And
yeah, we definitely live in a very different world from the one that we evolved in, in groups. It's pretty amazing how quickly things have changed in the last, even 100 years, 200 years. So it's no surprise that we're having a difficulty adjusting to this new reality.
Yeah. It's a really complicated time we live in, and addiction and anxiety, depression, all of it seems to be linked to Grof. Dr. Stanislav Grof, who's the tradition we come from, says that all of this stuff stems from alienation, which is another way of saying lack of connection.
Yeah.
So we're like abstracted from ourselves, our lives, our bank accounts, our relationships, everything. And it's hard to rebuild that. But what I think Iboga, and in particular the ceremony you were in with a group of people, that can help build community. It seemed like the facility you were at kind of supported that as well. It's like about relationship and helping you build a narrative for how this is working for you. Or maybe we can chat about that briefly. Like how was it coming down or like reintegrating after your sessions? Was that really a complicated time for you?
I mean, my whole Iboga treatment was quite long. I was on quite a high dose of morphine and using street drugs on top of that. So it took a few sessions for me to completely detox. And, I was quite tired and exhausted after the first few sessions. I couldn't, and Iboga, it's very intense. So like I couldn't even, stand up for a few days. I think for after the first session, I think I slept for 5 days. It was very exhausting. Your body's going through, incredible changes and stress. But once I completed my detox, I felt really good. And I was so grateful to be free from all of these substances that have ruled my life. But I still had to work. Like integration is super important. I did some integration sessions with somebody with experience. I stuck close to people from the Iboga treatment, like Mark especially, and this newfound community I had. And that's actually really important, no matter how you choose to recover or what you do to get sober and stay sober. Having a community around you and staying connected with people is so, so important. And that was my focus. I just tried to focus on doing healthy and positive things, getting out for walks, runs. Just staying connected, eating well. But most importantly, I would say is staying connected with my community, with people around me, with a support system.
So were you going to groups like NA or AA or anything like that? Or what kind of groups did you have?
I had a recovery community that I attended regularly, but also, like I said, I kept in close contact with the psychedelics community, the underground healers that had helped me. Nick and Tyler were obviously a huge support. We've grown very close over the course of this, and even just friends and family, just reaching out as much as I can, because, when I start to isolate and not stay close to people, that's when I start to get into trouble.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a really great story. It's like we can get distracted out of our routine that we know is healthy and just start taking shortcuts because it might feel easier, but then it makes us feel more sick or more
totally. Yeah, it was uncomfortable.
Maybe.
I mean, I definitely had a lot of discomfort just learning to, be still or be with myself and not have an escape. That's part of recovery, and it's very uncomfortable. It takes time to get used to that. I was always used to having some kind of coping mechanism that took me out of myself, that just helped me not feel uncomfortable or whatever negative feeling I was feeling. So that's always a challenge, and there's no shortcut to that. You do have to just learn to be in your body and feel feelings, which I did not like very much, but it gets easier over time.
Absolutely. Yeah. Were you able to, Adrianne, to share your story with any of the physicians you worked with before your Iboga treatment afterwards?
I have, with my, I have a nurse practitioner and a few medical professionals. I suppose they seem like interested. I did go to a clinic, the Rapid Access Clinic here in Vancouver, and I found the staff there to be amazing and very supportive and non-judgmental. I did have a number of doctors, like my family doctor prior, and a couple other doctors that were very non-supportive and dismissive of what I was choosing to do. So that made it more challenging because I felt like I couldn't be honest and I didn't have their support. But I'm surprised at how many medical professionals were supportive afterwards. And I think a lot of people that have seen the movie are probably medical professionals that are quite interested in the topic.
Yeah, I mean, the doctors only know what they've learned in school, right? So they don't learn much. Well, they don't learn anything about the plant medicine. But one thing that Adrianne said very poignantly in the film is that, the plant community, plant medicine community, and the Western medical community, they really need to work together to sort of solve some of these issues, because everything is getting worse and worse as we rely primarily on prescription medications that don't work for a lot of people, and other things that are palliative, where you get prescribed something and that's something you need to take for the rest of your life. And then if that gives you a bad side effect, well, they'll prescribe you another pill for that, and then that one gives you a side effect, and then they prescribe another one for that. Next thing you know, you're on 8 medications, and it really hasn't sorted out the root cause of your issues. And if you were able to just deal with the issues, and sometimes it's just feeling. So if you're depressed, or if you're sad and depressed, the doctor's going to give you an antidepressant, whereas a psychedelic is going to make you in a way experience it even more, and deal with it, and maybe cry and just let it go. But once you've done that, you can heal and move on. But if you take an antidepressant, it doesn't allow you to feel that anymore. So you might feel better, but a lot of people find that it affects many other things in their life negatively, from weight gain to sexual drive and stuff like that.
And even though it's true that the Western medicine and Eastern medicine do need to sort of connect and work together, it's not something that's going to happen without a total change in the legality of the substances and the acceptance of them by governments, because of course doctors are fearful of malpractice suits and losing their licenses and being sued and everything like that if they were to approve or suggest to patients that they should try psychedelics. So they're just not going to touch it unless they're like legally mandated to do so.
Right. A line that came up for me when you were talking about the difference between kind of modern medical practice and hopefully what future medical practice looks like for this stuff. And Dr. Stanislav Grof's one of my favorite lines, I use it a lot, is the full expression of a emotion is also its funeral pyre. So if we can really amplify those things and really work it out in a session or a couple sessions, then its energy really dissipates. Its hold over us really dissipates. And it's a nice psychodynamic depth psychology way of looking at it. Not necessarily the way the neuroscience people or plant medicine people might look at it.
I definitely feel that I find with anxiety, the more that you try to suppress it or any other emotions, the bigger they get. And like I said, it's just about allowing yourself to feel the feelings and work through them. I think that is the key. Totally.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's something interesting about being able to do that.
There's another movie that's really interesting called Inside Out. It's an animated film about feelings. And
yes, the Disney film.
Yeah.
I think, it's like we had a number of people when we were doing the theatrical tours bring their kids to Dosed. And Nick and I were like, well, we know that it's rated, it's unrated in the States, but it's like PG or, PG-14 in that range in other countries. And it's like, okay, that makes sense. And then this one lady brought her 10-year-old and her 12-year-old, and it was a form of learning. And she messaged and thanked us for making the film and for Adrianne and her courage to go through this and all of that good stuff. And I was kind of curious, what did the 10-year-old think, right? But she's obviously got some smart young kids, and it was a positive experience, and something that would be beneficial, I think, for kids to learn that it's okay to have, even if somebody doesn't have access to psychedelics, it's also just okay to talk about their feelings and depression or anxiety and stuff like that they're going through before they stuff those feelings and it leads them down a road that could potentially lead to, worse addiction and stuff like that in the future. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Yeah, and this is not the first time Inside Out has come up on our show, which is interesting.
Really?
Yeah,
It's
no,
just- I forgot about it for a moment.
I asked her if she had shown her kids that, and she said for like the younger kids, like 6 years old, that type of thing, whatever range, she said absolutely, and she recommends that all of her friends' parents show their children that. And I mean, I saw it just a couple years ago, and I thought it was a cool way of looking at, you know, the feelings and stuff like that. And then after going through this whole process and learning so much more about like the mind and how psychedelics can help with stuff like that, you know, it's just, yeah, it's one film. It's like if the kids are really young, show them that. But at some point, I mean, I say Dosed is for the children too, because maybe it's for the teens, but it's an interesting, entertaining story. And it kind of shows people that like it creates a safe space for people to talk about mental health, addiction, and psychedelics. And what's wrong with being educated about something. And then maybe if a kid is going through some bullying or something in high school, you know, maybe they'll speak to people, their parents or other people about it and work through it in a healthy way instead of stuffing those feelings.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. It would be amazing if they could show this to like freshmen or sophomores in high schools or something.
Yeah.
It would be quite transformational for, you know, students' relationship to drugs. It's
and it would be amazing if there was rites of passage psychedelic experiences for young people as well. I just think it's so beneficial, having done some big mushroom sits and 5-MeO experiences since kind of coming into this world through the filming of this documentary. I just think it's like one of the most beneficial things that you can do, and it would be so for teens as well.
Yeah, I think someone was pressed recently for like what age is okay. I think it was maybe Mark Hayden getting pressed for what age is okay for these rites of passages.
Yeah,
I think he said, "Well, when you're mature."
Mm-hmm.
And you know, when is that really? Like historically, people were having babies at 11 and 12 years old and being like adults.
Yeah.
And that's not very long ago where this is happening.
yeah.
And so it's like, is that maturity? Like, I don't know. But I think eventually he landed on like 12 years old or something for rites of passage into adulthood.
Oh, wow.
Well, everybody's so scared of just saying like, oh, you know, this is something that teens should do, because nobody wants to have anything bad happen and then have it gets traced back to them.
Right.
But look at the realities of what teens are going through with just the rampant like alcohol and other drugs and like, you know, vaping and smoking and like all the other
Prescription
prescription
medications,
medications, everything that's available. And there's like no guidance, no supervision a lot of the time. And, you know, it's what we're doing right now isn't working. And I dare say it would be better if there were, you know, rites of passage with psychedelics in controlled settings with proper setting and dose with young people, because it really helps you recontextualize and reframe things in your mind and understand maybe like, oh, you know, I don't want to fall victim to this peer pressure, or maybe what I thought was important isn't important in terms of what you value in life and things. So.
And I'd like to suggest a safe legal alternative of holotropic breathwork, which is, you know, pretty extraordinarily powerful. For me, it was as powerful as my most intense ayahuasca experience. So,
Wow.
Yeah.
And I've been practicing this since 2003. So I've seen transformations in other people and myself with it. And it's available now. We don't need to screw with the law. Just need a parent's permission and we can do it.
Is it legal to breathe in your state?
Here, there's less oxygen, but yeah, typically.
Cool.
It's really interesting doing this at 10,000 feet of altitude. It's I feel like people kick in a lot sooner than at sea level.
Oh, really? I never thought of that. That's interesting.
Yeah, blood chemistry is really different at altitude for some reason.
Yeah.
Don't totally understand it, but something about adjusting for CO2 to O2 levels.
Huh.
Yeah.
Ingrid Pasty, who we interviewed for Dosed, she's a psychiatrist and she's worked with psychedelics, you know, LSD going way back to when it was legal. And so she's been through all of that. And I believe she worked with Stanislav Grof.
Yep.
You know, when psychedelics were made illegal, they started working doing the breath work. And she said that is one modality that can help people a lot, and it can speed up the therapy process. So, for example, she said that if somebody has suffered from sexual abuse as a child, it might take them 20 years to get over that through conventional talk therapy. And it could take only maybe 3 years if holotropic breath work is used. And then she said that if you can go a step further and do psychedelics in a supported setting, it could be a matter of just a few months. So,
yeah, it's interesting. We don't like to call it a therapy, but we say it can be a great adjunct to therapy.
Yeah.
We largely try to say it's good for self-exploration and self-development. And we have the core idea is that we all have this inner healer in us. The same way our body knows how to heal a wound, it also knows how to heal psychic situations as well, mental situations. And this is just in a nice, safe container, and hopefully can move people towards a more whole state, a more happy, healthy state. And that's kind of what I've seen. It's it's quite the thing. If I ever get up to Vancouver, I'd love to do some workshops with you guys. If I'm allowed in the country, number one, and then if and when this pandemic is over.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Your city's been on my radar for a while.
I actually did do some breath work when we started filming. I don't know that I got the full benefit because I was not sober. I was on quite a lot of, medications still at that point, but it was pretty powerful. And I definitely like to try it again and see how different it is for me being sober and clear-headed.
Stan Groff, yeah, I would love to see that too. I talked to Stan, we had lunch one day and was talking to him about addiction and breathwork or psychedelic sessions for people with addiction. And his line, like his wife, it's pretty public. Christina was a very severe alcoholic, and he also encountered a lot of people with addiction issues in his work. And he said about 30 days of sobriety is necessary before jumping into really serious depth work like psychedelic work.
Yeah.
To have an impact. And I'm sure you kind of saw that with your process, Adrianne, like the longer away you were from using, maybe the better it was for you. Like I know you needed a sharp interrupt, but it was like, once you're a month or 3 months out, perhaps you start feeling like it can unfold more.
Yeah.
Did you feel anything like that?
Yeah. So after the Iboga, which helped me detox, and obviously I had the psychospiritual experience with that. I think about 3 or 4 months after that, when I was sober, I did another mushroom sit, and that was absolutely like life-changing. That was the most intense, spiritual experience I have ever had. And I credit that to the psilocybin. I found the psilocybin really, really helped me once I was sober and off the opiates. So, but I think I needed that little bit of time. I mean, it takes time for your brain to heal, start to level out. And I found that hugely beneficial 3 to 4 months after being completely sober. And that was a huge part of my recovery also.
Yeah, that's huge and really helpful for you to say that for other people. I think it's like, it might be really, really hard for a while.
Yeah.
But I think, do you feel like it's true that as you have this momentum kind of building in your life, it's easier day by day, or is it still just as hard for you every day?
You mean sobriety?
Right.
Oh, definitely. My life is like day to day is so much easier than, it took. I would think about, and I would have using dreams almost every single night, in my first year of sobriety. It takes time. And, I wouldn't say that I was triggered to use at all or that I wanted to use, but I feel like emotionally I'm a lot more leveled out. Yeah, definitely the longer that you stay sober, the easier it gets. I wouldn't say that like I'm in the clear. Like I feel like I have to work every day at my recovery. And it's important to keep doing the things that I need to do, staying grounded, doing healthy things. But it definitely gets easier. It takes time to learn new ways to live, new habits. I was doing something, for so long. I was living a certain way that doesn't just change overnight. It's a process. And it's an ongoing process, I think, for the rest of your life, but it definitely gets easier.
Great. So This has been really fun, and I hate to end it at an hour, but I think we should. And maybe could any of you suggest where people can see the film or what's coming up with the film?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can rent or purchase the film online. So the easiest thing to do is to go to our webpage, www.dosedmovie.com, DOSED movie.com. And there's some links there to rent or own the film on Vimeo. And also, for those that are interested, we are part of something exciting on a Sunday, which is Bicycle Day. And it's called the Sacred Solidarity. It's like Sacred Solidarity. There's a lot of great guest speakers that will be involved in a series of panels all day long, like Paul Stamets, Gabor Mate, Rick Doblin, things like that. Great luminaries in the psychedelic field. And then people will have an opportunity to watch Dosed or Fantastic Fungi or what's the other one, Tyler? Planetary, yeah. And then join a panel with the filmmakers afterwards, all online, to talk about the films and how everything is related to topics like disconnection and things like that. So it should be a really great thing, yeah, for those that are interested.
Excellent. Well, thank you all, Nick, Tyler, Adrianne. Really appreciate your work on this movie and getting it out to people. It's really meaningful to show folks that there are other options than this conventional kind of really rough and subpar situation we've got out there in the medical field. So really thank you for showing folks that there's revolutionary stuff out there. And I really advise everybody watch the movie. It was really great.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for having us.
And there you have it. The crew from Dosed. I definitely suggest everybody check it out in person. It's a really great film. I wish we could do premieres right now and get together and talk about it in person as soon as it's safe. I think it's a good idea to probably do this. So check it out. Tell your friends about it. And, it makes a good gift if you just rent it for a couple bucks and watch it with some friends or something like that. So definitely worth it. Please check it out. And like I said in the intro, anything you can do to help us would be great. We could take small donations at patreon.com/psychedelics today. We would also just love a review on Facebook. It's just facebook.com/psychedelics today, and leave a review there. Or if you have an iPhone, just go to the podcast app and leave a review. Anything helps. We appreciate you all. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and we'll see you on the next one. This is Joe Moore signing off for Psychedelics Today from Breckenridge, Colorado. Bye-bye.